I always thought if betrayal ever found its way into my life, it would crash in like a tidal wave, messy, loud, unmistakable. Maybe an overheard phone call, a lipstick stain, a slip-up so glaring it couldn't be denied. But when it came, it whispered. It was a Thursday morning. Cold, drizzling. The kind of day that presses against your bones and makes the inside of your home feel smaller. I'd just returned from an early coffee run, wiping the wet from my shoulders as I stepped into our foyer. The smell of warm cereal and kids' shampoo still hung in the air, remnants of the morning routine now gone quiet. Claire had already left for work. A conference day, she'd said. Back late. The kids were at school. The house was still. As I stepped into the bathroom, my eye caught something glinting on the bath mat, half swallowed by the threads of shag. I crouched instinctively, brushing my fingers over the metallic circle before picking it up. It was a tiny silver backing, the kind left behind when you push a pill through foil. I flipped it. A small number was printed on the inside. 3. Thursday. I blinked, suddenly aware of how loud my breathing had become in the silence of the house. It was a birth control pill blister, or part of one. Claire hadn't taken birth control since before Mia, our youngest, was born. We'd agreed, after 2 kids and several years of trial and error with hormonal side effects, that I'd get a vasectomy. Permanent. Clean. Done. And I did. A year after Mia's 2nd birthday, I'd signed the paperwork, booked the appointments, and made the snipped sacrifice with a slightly embarrassed grin and an ice pack. So why? Why on earth would Claire have birth control pills again? I wanted to believe it was nothing. Maybe old packaging. Something we'd overlooked during a cleanup. But the foil was crisp, recently torn. And the number 3 meant the pill had been taken yesterday, Wednesday, which meant she was actively taking them. My stomach tightened into a small, dense knot. I stood there, unmoving, letting the foil rest in my palm like a puzzle piece I didn't yet know how to place. The kids' toothbrushes sat in their holder. My razor, her bottle of perfume, the usual domestic landscape we'd both curated and lived in together for 11 years. Suddenly, it all looked foreign. I dropped the foil into the trash, then thought better of it and fished it out. If I confronted her now, she'd come up with something: stress regulation, hormonal balance. Maybe that would be true. Maybe I was being paranoid. But that foil was the first thing I'd seen that didn't fit in the picture. And if one thing didn't belong, maybe there were others. I kept the foil and went about my day pretending nothing had shifted. But everything had. I could feel it. Like when you sense someone watching you in a mirror. Nothing you can point to, yet the air bristles with unspoken truth. That night, I didn't say anything. Claire came home a bit later than usual, hair damp from the rain, cheeks pink from the cold. We ate leftover chicken Alfredo and made small talk about the kids, her meetings, my report backlog. I looked for signs. Her phone buzzed a few times. She picked it up each time quickly, glanced, and set it down screen first. She smiled when I made a joke, kissed me goodnight the same way she always had. Routine, practiced, perfect. But her scent lingered longer than usual. Not perfume. No, something else. A trace of unfamiliar cologne, subtle, but not mine. The next day, I spoke with our neighbor, Mrs. Adler. She's retired, mostly tends to her rose garden, and knows more about the comings and goings of our street than the local patrol car. I saw Claire getting into a white Lexus yesterday morning, she said casually, watering her petunias. Did she finally give in and try Uber? You know, I told her those buses are too slow. I froze mid-step. White Lexus? I asked, careful to sound curious, not concerned. She nodded. Yes, right before 9 a.m. sharp car. Same one I saw last week. Figured it was some rideshare. She had her work bag with her. I smiled, thanked her, and walked back inside. I opened the Uber app. My hands trembled slightly as I scrolled through the ride history tied to her account. We shared the same family plan. Nothing. No rides this week. None last week either. The rain returned that night, tapping gently against our bedroom windows like a second conscience. She was sleeping beside me, breathing steady, her arm draped across my chest like a tether to a life I was no longer sure we were both living in. I didn't sleep. The next morning, after she left, I retrieved a spare phone I'd used before upgrading last year. I set it up as a clone, mirroring hers using a software I'd researched late into the night. It would copy her messages, her call logs, even her app usage. I buried it under some winter sweaters in my office drawer. I knew what I was doing, and it disgusted me. But the foil had shifted something deep, something I couldn't ignore. The phone lit up around noon. A flood of data. I opened the messaging app first. Nothing unusual. No flirty messages. No hidden apps. No secrets. Then I opened WhatsApp. It was empty, except for one thread labeled only with a single initial, T. No photo. No number. Just a thread of text that began a few months ago. At first, the messages were bland. Conference talk. Schedules. Hotel rooms. I scrolled further, and things got clearer. I missed the way your hand felt when we were driving. Next week can't come fast enough. I need more than just the car ride home. My chest tightened. I clicked to view media in the chat. There were no photos, but one voice memo. I hesitated, then hit play. Her voice, soft, whispering, laughing. Don't forget your tie this time. You look like someone shy and turned sneaking out of my car. See you Thursday. I dropped the phone. Her lie was now a symphony. She had a second life that existed between work and home, folded neatly between conference rooms and curbside pickups. And apparently, in the back seat of a Lexus. By the time she came home that evening, I had already planted a voice recorder in her car, just under the driver's seat, tucked against the lining. It was small, subtle, motion-activated. It would capture everything said inside. Dinner was grilled salmon. She laughed when I poured us wine, said it felt like a date night. I smiled. I even kissed her, and I told her I'd drive her to work the next morning, a last-minute offer to beat the rain. She looked surprised, then nodded. Sure, she said. Thanks, babe. And just like that, my plan was in motion. I was going to drive her. I was going to find out where she'd usually go instead. And this time, I wasn't going to blink. I woke before the alarm, though I pretended otherwise. I kept my eyes shut as Claire moved quietly around the room. I could hear the faint rustle of her blouse, the tug of a zipper, the gentle creak of the drawer as she searched for earrings. She hummed under her breath, off-key, but familiar. She had no idea I was watching her through my lashes. When she leaned down to kiss me goodbye, her usual ritual, I surprised her. I'll drive you today, I mumbled, sitting up and rubbing my eyes like I'd just woken. She paused. Really? Sure. Figured I'd beat traffic anyway. Got some errands downtown. Saves you the Uber. There it was, a tiny flicker in her expression. Not panic exactly, but hesitation. She adjusted her scarf, buying a second before smiling. Okay, she said casually. Let me grab my files. We stepped into the garage together. Her car, a sensible gray hatchback, still had yesterday's dew beating across the hood. I opened the passenger door for her. She climbed in, smoothing her skirt. She thanked me, just like always. Only now, every word felt like theater. The ride started in silence, the engine humming low. The morning traffic was sparse, and the clouds overhead churned like they were keeping secrets. I glanced at her in the passenger seat. She was scrolling on her phone, her expression carefully neutral. So I said, "Remind me where I'm dropping you today?" She blinked. "The office," she replied, tapping her screen. "Same place as usual." That was a lie. I knew where she worked. It was in the opposite direction of the turn she usually took, according to the GPS logs I had secretly retrieved from her car 2 weeks ago. Every Thursday for the past 2 months, her route veered west instead of east. She wasn't going to the office. I turned east anyway. She said, glancing up. "You're going the wrong way." I smiled. "I thought we'd grab coffee first. You've got time, right?" She hesitated. "Not really. I have a call at 9. We'll make it quick." She didn't push it further, but her grip on her phone tightened. We drove a few more minutes, the silence stretching. I could feel the words pressing against my teeth, begging to be let out. The questions, the accusations, the raw fury that had been brewing since the foil pill backing first sparked suspicion. But I didn't want her denial. Not yet. I wanted the truth. And sometimes, you have to steer someone straight into it. "Actually," I said, turning left instead of right. "Let's take your route. I'm curious." She blinked again, alarm blooming in her eyes. "My route? Yeah. The one you usually take on Thursdays." What do you mean?" I slowed the car, easing toward the road she'd driven dozens of times, the one that didn't lead anywhere near her office. The one that, according to GPS, ended at a private condominium complex on Marlowe Avenue. She stiffened beside me. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said too quickly. I kept driving. The buildings began to blur together, squat brick structures, faded signage, Old industrial warehouses now repurposed into overpriced lofts. Gentrification wrapped in gray skies. Then I turned into the entrance of the complex. Marlowe Ridge. Claire said nothing. Her hands rested in her lap, perfectly still. Not clenched, not relaxed. Just still, like a statue waiting to see if the wind would tip it. I parked in the visitor section. The same spot she used every Thursday. I knew this from the tracker. I knew which condo door she walked to, which floor it was on, how long she stayed. I turned off the engine and faced her. So I said, "You gonna tell me whose place this is?" She turned to look at me slowly. Her face was blank, unreadable. "Is this a joke?" she asked. "No. Why are we here?" "I could ask you the same thing." She stared, then laughed softly. The kind of laugh that people use when they're cornered but still clinging to the illusion of control. "Babe," she said, "this is crazy. I told you. I've been Ubering to work because of parking. I don't know anyone who lives here." I pulled out my phone, opened the Uber app, held it up. No rides. Not for the last 8 weeks. Not one. Her face changed. It was subtle, like watching a door slowly shut from the inside. "I don't know what to say," she said, quieter now. I didn't push. Not yet. Instead, I stepped out of the car and walked to her side. Opened the door. She didn't move. Her eyes flicked from me to the building entrance, back to me. "Come on," I said. "Why?" "I think we both need to see something." "I'm not going in there." I waited. She looked at me for a long, hard second, then stepped out. We walked together. Past the iron gate. Through the glass door. Up the elevator. I didn't touch her. Didn't speak. Just led. When the elevator chimed at the 3rd floor, I stepped into the hallway and turned left. She hesitated before following. I stopped in front of Unit 304. I didn't knock. I just stood there, letting her hear the quiet hum of the building, letting the tension spool like wire inside both of us. Her breathing changed. Shallow now. Like her lungs didn't want to cooperate. Finally, she spoke. "You're not supposed to be here," she said. The words didn't surprise me. "You are," I replied. "Every Thursday. Right around this time." She swallowed. "It's not what you think." I almost laughed. The cliché of it all. The script she had already memorized. But I didn't want to hear her lines. I wanted silence. I wanted the weight of it to crush whatever lies she had prepared. So I said nothing. After a while, she sat down on the hallway bench. Her legs looked weak. Her shoulders slumped. She stared at the floor like it held answers. "I met him at a conference," she said. 3 months ago." I didn't flinch. It was supposed to be a one-time thing. Then it wasn't. I nodded slowly. Not at her, but at the truth finally arriving. "It was always on Thursdays," I said. She didn't reply. "Why didn't you just tell me?" I asked. My voice was even, but I could feel the tremble behind it. "I didn't want to lose everything," she whispered. I looked at her then, really looked, and I didn't see the woman I married. I saw a stranger who wore her face. "Everything's already gone," I said. We rode the elevator back down in silence. Outside, the sky had started to pour. She reached for the door handle, but I pressed the lock. "I'm not driving you to him," I said. Her lips parted, stunned. "Find your own way home." And then I got out, leaving her in the car. Alone. In the rain. The rain followed me like a loyal hound. As I walked away from the car, it beat against my jacket, soaked through my collar, and settled into the threads of my jeans like cold hands tugging me back. I didn't turn around. Not even when I heard the muffled thud of the passenger door opening. Not when she called my name. Let her stand there. Let the sky drench her until the truth clung to her skin the way shame never did. My steps weren't fast, but they were steady. Through the gate, past the glass door, down the sidewalk. Each footfall a slow exhale of fury that had nowhere else to go. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't care. The only thing I knew for sure was that I couldn't sit in that car with her. Couldn't smell her perfume or feel the ghost of her hand on the seat beside me. I walked 4 blocks before I realized my fists were clenched so tight my fingers had gone pale. I forced them open, took a breath, tasted the rust of blood and rain in the back of my throat. Everything felt metallic, bitter, electric. Eventually, I ducked into a diner. The bell above the door chimed like it had no idea what kind of man just walked through. I slid into a corner booth, dripping. The waitress brought me coffee without a word. Maybe she saw something in my face. Or maybe soaked, hollow-eyed men were just part of the job. The mug was warm, and for a moment, I wrapped my hands around it like it could tether me to the earth. She'd lied. Over and over, in ways both small and surgical. It wasn't just the pills. Or the fake Uber rides. It was the way she still kissed me goodbye. The way she smiled when I handed her coffee. The tiny thanks she whispered when I brushed hair from her face. Those weren't just habits. They were alibis. Camouflage. For 3 months, I'd been making love to a ghost while another man memorized the same parts of her I once called mine. I should have seen it sooner. The late meetings. The extra showers. The way she kept her bag closer to her than usual. I mistook it for routine. For the steady erosion of time on a marriage. But it wasn't erosion. It was excavation. She had been digging herself out, one lie at a time. I stared at the rain-streaked window beside me. The streets outside were blurred in silver. Somewhere in that haze, she was either walking or calling for a ride. I wondered what story she'd tell this time. Flat tire? Sudden illness? Maybe she'd say I'd snapped. Made a scene. Left her stranded for no reason. I pulled out my phone and scrolled back to the clone messages. T. Hadn't messaged her in 2 days. Their last conversation was short. T. Same time Thursday. Claire. I'll bring wine this time. T. You always do. I stared at that last line for a long time. It felt surgical. Detached. A sentence soaked in comfort, in ritual. She always did. Because this wasn't new. This was their routine. The kind of intimacy that no longer required foreplay or pretense. They'd reached the point where they didn't need to say, I miss you anymore. Just a place, a time, and a bottle of wine. The waitress returned and slid a plate of toast across the table. On the house, she said softly. You look like someone who got caught in more than just the rain. I nodded but didn't answer. Because how do you explain this kind of storm? I stayed in that booth for over an hour. At some point, I texted my assistant and said I'd be working remotely the rest of the day. Then I opened a new tab and searched for the address of Unit 304's owner. Not T. That's not what I needed. I wanted a name. A face. Something to pair with the betrayal that now slept in my bed and used my last name. The property records pulled fast. Unit 304 was leased under a corporate rental group. Monthly terms. Perfect for traveling professionals or out-of-town consultants. A safe, nameless way to keep a second life fully furnished. I copied the lease info, then searched through Claire's emails on the cloned account. Took me 5 minutes to find a confirmation from the rental agency, but it wasn't in her inbox. It was in the archive folder. She had forwarded a confirmation to herself 6 weeks ago. Subject line, confirmation, unit reserved. No message body, just the lease PDF. And the name, Thomas Velt. I didn't recognize it. Not a coworker. Not one of our friends. I clicked the PDF and scrolled through the lease. His name and email. A corporate domain I didn't know. I stared at it like it might blink. Thomas. That was T. I said his name aloud, letting it settle in my mouth. It felt wrong. Foreign. The name of a man who had unmade my life and still didn't know it. I finished the coffee. Left a 20 on the table. Walked back into the rain. When I got home, the house was silent. Claire's car was in the driveway. I entered through the garage and stood in the mudroom for a long time, letting water drip from my sleeves onto the tile. The quiet in our home had changed. It was no longer peaceful. It was surgical. A vacuum where warmth once lived. I walked into the living room. Claire was on the couch, blanket over her knees, her hair still damp. She looked up when I entered. You left me, she said. Her voice cracked, but I didn't care. I sat across from her. Didn't say a word. After a beat, she spoke again. I didn't want it to go this far. I stared at her. My voice came slow and cold. You leased him a second home. She flinched. I saw her jaw tighten. The color drained slightly from her cheeks. So, I continued, how long has it really been? Her fingers curled around the edge of the blanket. 3 months. Try again. She looked up sharply. You only started using the pills again 10 weeks ago, I said. But the first Uber lie? That was 4 months ago. I don't remember, she whispered. I leaned forward. Then let me help you remember. I pulled the phone from my pocket and placed it gently on the table between us. The screen lit up with her own texts. The color drained from her face. Her mouth opened, closed. Then she just sat back, like someone hit in the chest with invisible hands. I stood. My voice didn't rise. I was done shouting. I want him gone. I want the truth. I want you to sleep somewhere else tonight. She looked at me with a strange mix of defiance and shame. I didn't mean for it to be him, she said, as if that somehow mattered. I'm sure you didn't, I said. But it is. I turned and walked up the stairs, each step heavier than the last. Behind me, I heard her cry, but I didn't turn back. Not this time. I didn't sleep that night. Not even close. Upstairs, in the guest room where I now kept distance from the shared life I once cherished, I lay still beneath the ceiling fan, listening to the low whir as it spun like a second hand mocking time. I stared at nothing. Thought about everything. About the way betrayal doesn't just cut, it seeps. Fills the spaces between memories and rewrites them. Erases laughter. Recodes touch. Renders even the gentlest glance into something suspicious. I thought about the morning routines, the birthday cards, the weekends with the kids. Her hand on mine during parent-teacher conferences. All of it repurposed, reduced to theater. And beneath all of that, a new question emerged like a splinter in my spine. Why him? She hadn't told me who he was. I hadn't asked. Not directly, but I knew enough. Thomas Velt. Corporate address, registered lease, hidden messages. Still, it felt incomplete. Too clean. At sunrise, I brewed coffee I couldn't taste and sat at my laptop. I logged back into the cloned phone backup and opened her gallery. Photos were scarce. Claire wasn't reckless. Most were work-related snapshots, notes, or the occasional picture of our kids. But one album was hidden, buried in the phone's internal storage under a name I almost missed, receipts. Inside were only 4 images. The first was of wine. A bottle, half-poured, beside 2 glasses on a granite counter. Candlelight reflected in the surface. The second showed a hotel key card. The Renly, 19th floor, room 1908. The third was her in a mirror. Hair down. A black dress. The kind I'd only seen her wear once before, our 10th anniversary dinner. And the fourth was the one that made my breath stop. It was Thomas. Half a face, really. Cropped. Intentional. You could see his mouth. The shadow of stubble. The edge of his glasses. But what stood out wasn't his face. It was the lanyard around his neck. A conference badge. He was wearing the same company logo that appeared on the rental agreement. Now I had more than a name. I had a company. A location. A conference date. I pulled up LinkedIn, searching for employees with his name. Dozens of results. I filtered by city. One profile clicked. Thomas Velt, Senior Solutions Manager, Keurig Systems. He lived in the city. Frequent traveler. Based on his post history, he'd recently returned from a quarterly client summit. 3 months ago. The same week Claire had her team-building conference. The same week she came home with new perfume and a tension in her shoulders she blamed on too many meetings. I sat back in my chair and let it sink in. He wasn't just some random affair. He was curated. Chosen. A man with a disposable lifestyle and a flexible schedule. A man who didn't need attachments, just opportunity. And Claire gave it to him. I glanced at the clock. 6:43 a.m. Downstairs, the house stirred. Water pipes groaned. Footsteps padded lightly across hardwood. I didn't move. A moment later, a soft knock at the guest room door. "Breakfast's ready," Claire said through the wood. I didn't respond. She didn't knock again. When I came downstairs 20 minutes later, the kids were already halfway through their cereal. Claire sat at the table, hair damp, eyes puffy but composed. She looked up at me briefly, a silent check-in, then down again as if the weight of her actions was too much to hold my gaze. I poured a coffee I wouldn't drink and pretended to eat a slice of toast. The kids chatted about school, a field trip coming up, some art project. I nodded in the right places. Smiled once. But inside, I was already writing a script of my own. I didn't want confrontation. Not yet. What I wanted was clarity. I needed to see him. That night, after the kids were asleep and Claire retreated to our bedroom, the one I no longer stepped into, I sent a message. To him. From a burner email I created under a fake name, I wrote. Subject, regarding Claire. You don't know me, but I know you know her. I think it's time we talk. Tomorrow. 6 p.m. The Renly Hotel bar. Don't be late. I included no signature. Just the note. I didn't know if he'd come. But if he did, I'd have my answers. The next day moved like wet cement. I couldn't focus. I ran errands I didn't need to run. Took work calls I couldn't recall. Kept checking the burner email for a reply. Nothing. 5:12 p.m. Still nothing. I dressed anyway. Button-down shirt. Neutral jacket. Nothing too formal. I didn't want to look like a threat. Just curious. Controlled. I told Claire I had a late work meeting. She didn't question it. Of course she didn't. At 5:45, I pulled into the parking structure of the Renly, the same hotel where that room key photo had been taken. Room 1908. I considered going up there myself, just to stand outside the door and imagine what happened inside. But no, not yet. Instead, I made my way to the bar. Dimly lit, polished wood, a quiet buzz of clinking glasses and muted conversation. I took a seat in the far corner, facing the entrance, ordered sparkling water, and waited. At exactly 6:07 p.m., he walked in. Thomas. He matched the photo perfectly, taller than me by maybe 2 inches, dark hair, lean frame, confident but not cocky. The kind of man who's used to attention but doesn't seek it. He scanned the room, paused when he saw me. I nodded. He approached, uncertain. "You him?" he asked. I gestured to the seat across from me. "Have a drink. Or don't. Your call." He sat, ordered a scotch. I waited. When the drink came, he took a sip, then leaned forward. "So," he said, "you're her husband." I nodded. He sighed. "Look, I didn't know at first. She said she was separated. I never meant." "Don't," I interrupted. "Don't lie. You knew." He didn't respond. "You knew, and you kept going." He looked down at his glass, swirled the amber liquid. "What do you want?" he asked. I smiled slightly. "I want to know what she said. About me. About our life." He exhaled, rubbed the back of his neck. "That you were roommates in practice. That the spark had died. That she was staying for the kids." I nodded. Classic script. "She ever say she loved you?" He hesitated. "She said she felt alive. With me." That one hurt. Not the words. The sincerity. He wasn't bragging, just repeating what he'd been told. I leaned in. "Do you love her?" He blinked. "No. I mean, it wasn't like that. It was just convenient." He swallowed. "Yeah." I sat back. Let the silence fill the space between us. "I'm not here to fight you," I said finally. "I'm here to end this." His brow furrowed. "How?" I reached into my pocket and slid something across the table. A small USB drive. "What's this?" "Insurance," I said. "You don't talk to her again. You don't text. Don't call. Don't meet. You disappear. Or that drive finds its way to your boss, your wife. If you have one. Maybe even your board." He paled. "You don't know who I am." "I know enough." He looked at the drive like it burned his hand. After a long pause, he stood up and left. I sat there for several more minutes, finishing the drink he'd left behind. When I finally stood to go, I passed by the elevator bank. Paused. 19th floor. I didn't intend to press the button, but my hand moved anyway. The elevator climbed slow, each number lit like a countdown. When the doors opened, I stepped out, turned left. Room 1908. I stood outside the door, heart pounding, then reached for the handle. It wasn't locked. Room 1908 smelled like expensive soap and the ghosts of strangers. The door swung inward without resistance, and I stepped into a stillness that felt rehearsed. The curtains were drawn, but thin light leaked through, catching on the polished edges of furniture and a single half-drunk bottle of wine sitting on the desk. 2 glasses. Her habit. His ritual. I closed the door behind me quietly. The soft click was louder than I expected. My heart drummed against my ribs, but my hands were steady. It struck me how calm I felt, as if some invisible line had been crossed, and there was nothing left but clarity. The room was tidy, too tidy. Bed made, pillows fluffed. Housekeeping had come and gone. The only evidence of them was the wine and a faint scent of her perfume rising from the air like steam. My wife's perfume. In a room I'd never been invited to. I moved to the desk. On the blotter lay a key card, a hotel notepad with a scrawled phone number, and a slip of paper with the name, Velt, written in block letters for room service. Next to it sat a small velvet box. I opened it. Inside was a necklace, delicate gold, heart-shaped pendant, tiny stones glittering. The receipt lay beneath it. Purchased yesterday. For her. I shut the box and exhaled slowly. My hands shook for the first time all day. This was where she became someone else. Where she told herself she was free. Where she invented a version of herself that could laugh at whispered jokes and drink wine at noon and press against a stranger without thinking about the children's drawings magnet to our fridge. This was where my marriage ended, and I hadn't even been invited to the wake. I pulled out my phone. It was already recording. I filmed everything. The wine, the glasses, the necklace, the scrawled note. Not because I needed proof. Not for a lawyer. For me. to remember the exact moment the truth stopped hiding. When I turned back toward the door, I heard it, the soft ding of an elevator arriving down the hall. A pause, then footsteps. They stopped outside. The handle turned. For a second, I pictured Thomas walking in, surprised to find me here, maybe trying to explain himself. Maybe even Claire. Maybe both of them, ready to resume their ritual, unaware it was over. But the door didn't open. Instead, a quiet knock. Then her voice. "Please," she whispered. "Open the door." I stood there, inches away. My fingers hovered near the handle. Every part of me burned to see her face, to see what expression she'd wear. Shame, anger, fear, some twisted hope. But another part of me, deeper and older, told me that seeing her now would only drag me back into the undertow. "I know you're in there," she said, louder now but still shaking. "I followed you. Please talk to me." I stayed silent. "You're scaring me," she said. "We can fix this." There it was, the word that always comes too late. Fix. I looked around the room one last time. The necklace, the glasses, the ghost of her perfume, all of it a mausoleum for what we had built. It hit me then with the weight of finality. I wasn't here to fight. I wasn't here to forgive. I was here to end it. I walked to the door, not to open it, but to leave. I slid the key card onto the desk beside the necklace, pulled the phone from my pocket and dropped it into the velvet box. Left it open so she would see the recording. A mirror held up to the life she'd chosen. Then I turned the deadbolt from the inside, cracked the door just enough to speak, and said the only words that felt true. "This was your car ride home." I closed it again before she could answer, crossed the room to the window, unlatched it, and stepped out onto the fire escape. The rain had eased into a mist, cool on my face as I descended. By the time she unlocked the door and entered, I was gone. I drove without destination, the city sliding past like a smudged painting. My hands trembled on the wheel, but beneath the tremor was a strange, steady calm, like a fever breaking. I passed familiar intersections and unfamiliar alleys until the skyline shrank in my rearview mirror. At some point the road turned rural, the air smelled like wet earth, and the only sound was the soft hiss of tires on damp asphalt. I stopped at a turnout overlooking a wide expanse of fields. Killed the engine. Sat there with the quiet. The last 11 years unspooled behind my eyes like an old film reel. Our first apartment with the broken radiator, the day we brought our oldest home from the hospital, late nights studying bills, her laughter echoing off kitchen tiles as we danced barefoot after a promotion. All the scenes I thought belonged to a single story. Now they belonged to two. A notification buzzed on the dashboard. A text from her. "Where are you? Please come back. We can talk. Please." Then another. "The kids are asking for you." And another. "I'm sorry. Please." I stared at the screen until it went dark. Some part of me still wanted to turn around. Still wanted to believe that love could outshout betrayal. But the larger part of me knew that going back would only trap me inside a house built on quicksand. The rain stopped completely. A beam of late afternoon sun broke through the clouds, glinting off the hood of the car. I rolled down the window and inhaled deeply. The air smelled like new beginnings, raw, unshaped, but mine. I opened my glove compartment, pulled out the DNA test envelopes I'd mailed off weeks ago. They'd arrived yesterday while I was at work. I hadn't opened them yet. My hands trembled as I tore the seal. The results stared back at me. Both children mine. A sob tore out of me, unplanned. Not grief. Relief. At least that was still true. At least the one part of my life she hadn't rewritten was the part that mattered most. I sat there until the sun dipped low, painting the fields in gold. Then I turned the key in the ignition and pointed the car toward home. Not to her, but to them. My children. My future. The piece of the story that still belonged to me. As I drove, I realized something. Revenge wasn't the point anymore. Exposure wasn't the point. I had already walked out of the room she tried to hide me from. That was enough. That was freedom. The road ahead stretched open and unmarked. I didn't know exactly where it led, only that it was mine now. Mine alone. And for the first time since the foil pill backing had caught the morning light on our bathroom floor, I felt like I could breathe.